Police documented names, statements, vehicle descriptions, and locations. Witnesses pointed, reports were filed. Yet officers delayed decisive action, misjudging urgency. That hesitation let Theodore Robert Bundy keep moving, changing cities, refining methods. How does evidence sit untouched while danger accelerates? This reconstructs how investigative certainty formed too late nationwide scrutiny. This is the case we are bringing to you in this video. Please subscribe to our channel where we give you step-by-step on how this crime was investigated. What made students trust him? Investigators later reviewed photographs showing Theodore Robert Bundy, law student, offering help. Witnesses described casts, crutches, polite tone. Detectives noted behavior before disappearances differed from after. Cars parked near campuses, names logged, no arrest followed. Why did familiarity mute alarm when patterns first appeared? That question shadowed early reports across multiple jurisdictions during initial inquiries. Why did disappearances cluster? Detectives from Seattle Police Department mapped dates, locations, victim routines. Theodore Robert Bundy, suspect, appeared repeatedly near scenes. Yet reports framed encounters as benign. Officers compared missing person files, noting similar descriptions. Still, each case stayed isolated. What stops pattern recognition when evidence arrives fragmented and slow? Supervisors prioritized volume over synthesis during escalating caseload pressure periods. When did police narrow focus? After multiple reports, Detective Robert Keppel, task force investigator, examined Theodore Robert Bundy's movements. Vehicle records surfaced. A tan Volkswagen Beetle appeared repeatedly. Some officers argued coincidence, others flagged frequency. Surveillance discussions occurred. No warrant issued. Was caution protecting rights or allowing risk to grow unchecked while jurisdictional boundaries complicated authority decisions further internally documented? How did media shape perception? Newspapers published friendly photographs, labeling Theodore Robert Bundy a promising student. Investigators noted public tips slowed, not increased. Some witnesses second-guessed memories after coverage. Detectives logged retractions. Meanwhile, disappearances continued. Did reassurance from headlines blunt urgency, quietly steering investigators away from aggressive action? Editors favored human interest framing over cautionary language during ongoing inquiries' nationwide circulation. What shifted investigative momentum? In Utah, Detective Jerry Thompson, homicide investigator, reviewed Theodore Robert Bundy's arrest file after Carol DeRonch survived an attack. Her testimony contradicted earlier assumptions. Detectives compared sketches, statements, vehicle details. The pattern tightened. Still, interstate coordination lagged. How many warnings were needed before certainty outweighed hesitation across agencies sharing partial data under incompatible reporting systems then? Why didn't arrests end debate? Prosecutors filed charges. Defense challenged identification methods. Investigators documented lineups involving Theodore Robert Bundy, suspect. Some experts warned memory contamination. Detectives defended procedures as standard. Courts allowed evidence. Public assumed closure, but internal notes questioned reliability. Did legal progress mask unresolved investigative weaknesses? Appeal preparations highlighted procedural questions sidelined during initial trial phases, nationwide scrutiny. What evidence stayed contested? Forensic analysts examined bite mark photographs linked to Theodore Robert Bundy. Investigators recorded expert disagreements over methodology. Some called matches persuasive, others called them subjective. Courts admitted testimony. Detectives logged dissenting memos. Did reliance on disputed science strengthen cases? Or plant doubts that survive convictions documented within case files reviewed during post-conviction appeals processes repeatedly later nationally? How did escapes affect trust? After conviction, Theodore Robert Bundy, inmate, escaped custody twice. Investigators reviewed transport logs, staffing decisions, and courtroom security. Public outrage exploded. Media framed incompetence. Detectives quietly analyzed procedural gaps. Were failures individual negligence? Or systemic shortcuts normalized under pressure? Internal reports detailed missed checkpoints, unsecured windows, and underestimated risk assessments during transfers, hearings, evaluations periods. What changed public memory permanently? Discovery of victims' remains shifted tone. Investigators documented recovery sites linked to Theodore Robert Bundy. Maps, photographs, evidence tags multiplied. Media certainty hardened. Yet questions about earlier delays resurfaced. Did grim confirmation erase investigative missteps, or simply make them harder to confront as institutional narratives stabilized? Closing ranks against retrospective criticism. Nationwide discussions persisted unresolved. Why is this case still argued? Appeals courts reviewed convictions involving Theodore Robert Bundy. Judges weighed procedural fairness against overwhelming evidence. Investigators revisited files, defending choices. Critics highlighted tunnel vision and rushed decisions. The official story stands. But what unresolved contradiction keeps reopening debate decades later? Between certainty and caution, investigative confidence may have outrun verification during early critical windows. Why did investigators reassess earlier decisions? Detective Robert Keppel, task force investigator, reviewed early Washington reports after executions concluded. Files showed delayed cross-checks. Tips mentioning Theodore Robert Bundy were logged but not escalated. Supervisors cited workload constraints. Critics saw hesitation. Was this caution justified process? Or an early failure disguised as procedural restraint during crucial investigative windows that shaped later irreversible outcomes? What role did jurisdictional friction play? Detective Jerry Thompson, Utah investigator, documented communication gaps with Washington authorities. Requests moved slowly. Records arrived incomplete. Theodore Robert Bundy crossed state lines faster than paperwork. Officers debated authority boundaries. No centralized command existed. Did structural fragmentation prevent early containment, allowing mobility to outpace coordination, while agencies protected autonomy over shared urgency amid rising disappearances? Why were early witnesses doubted? Investigators revisited statements from women who encountered Theodore Robert Bundy unsuccessfully. Reports described discomfort, not crimes. Officers categorized encounters as non-criminal. Later comparisons revealed consistency. Detectives questioned their own thresholds. Should near misses have triggered escalation, or would action without crimes risk overreach? That unresolved judgment line haunted retrospective evaluations documented in internal reviews years afterward. How did profiling influence focus? Behavioral analysts consulted by investigators outlined offender patterns matching Theodore Robert Bundy. Yet profiles arrived after arrests began. Detectives questioned timing value. Some saw validation, others saw confirmation bias. Did profiling sharpen certainty or merely reinforce conclusions already reached? Internal memos reveal tension between analytical support and independent evidence evaluation during critical investigative stages. What evidence never reached juries? Defense filings listed excluded testimony questioning bite mark reliability involving Theodore Robert Bundy. Judges ruled relevance limited. Investigators noted rulings changed strategy. Critics argued juries saw certainty without context. Was exclusion protecting clarity or suppressing doubt? Appellate briefs later highlighted these decisions, fueling debates over evidentiary balance versus persuasive narrative construction in capital prosecutions. Why did public trust solidify despite disputes? Media retrospectives framed Theodore Robert Bundy as conclusively proven. Investigators noticed dissent fading. Questions labeled academic. Detectives who raised early concerns stopped interviews. Did finality become institutional necessity? Once executions occurred, investigative uncertainty lost platform. Closure narratives replaced procedural examination, narrowing space for reassessment, while unresolved decisions remained buried within archived files. How did executions affect evidence review? After Theodore Robert Bundy's death, forensic reanalysis slowed. Investigators documented halted testing. No defendant remained. Resources shifted. Critics argued truth pursuit ended prematurely. Supporters cited justice served. Does certainty require ongoing verification? Or does final punishment close inquiry by default? That philosophical divide shaped post-case policies across multiple agencies handling closed serial investigations. Why do experts still disagree? Forensic odontologists continue debating bite mark validity tied to Theodore Robert Bundy cases. Investigators track evolving standards. What was admissible then is questioned now. Does retroactive science undermine past certainty or reflect progress? Courts resist reopening conclusions, yet academic disputes persist, keeping investigative decisions under scrutiny long after legal outcomes fix narratives publicly. What remains untested? Some physical evidence connected to Theodore Robert Bundy sits archived without modern DNA analysis. Investigators cite chain of custody concerns. Critics cite opportunity. Why preserve artifacts if not re-examined? The gap between preservation and verification remains. Does maintaining evidence imply doubt or simply protocol? That ambiguity sustains continued interest and unresolved tension within investigative legacies. So where does certainty truly form? Investigators reviewing the Theodore Robert Bundy case confront layered decisions. Delays, assumptions, confirmations. The official story stands firm. Yet each defended choice shadows another possible path. If evidence, timing, and interpretation shift outcomes, what defines investigative truth? That unresolved contradiction ensures this case remains examined, debated, and never entirely closed. Why did early police interviews remain limited? Detective David Reichert, King County investigator, reviewed transcripts involving Theodore Robert Bundy. Questions stayed general. Follow-ups delayed. Officers feared leading witnesses. Critics argue caution reduced clarity. Could sharper questioning have accelerated suspicion? Or would aggressive tactics compromise admissibility? That balance between restraint and urgency defined early investigative posture, shaping how information matured under constrained procedural norms. How did vehicle evidence complicate certainty? Investigators logged multiple Volkswagen Beetles registered regionally. Theodore Robert Bundy owned one, but so did others. Detectives debated specificity. Surveillance units monitored movements intermittently. No direct linkage surfaced initially. Did abundance dilute suspicion? Or did investigators underestimate probabilistic weight? Vehicle logs later appeared decisive, but only after disappearances forced retrospective aggregation across jurisdictions. Why did surveillance stop repeatedly? Detective Robert Keppel documented limited manpower tracking. Theodore Robert Bundy. Teams rotated, gaps emerged. Supervisors prioritized confirmed cases. Surveillance notes show lost visual contact multiple times. Was Bundy benefiting from resource scarcity or strategic caution? Each lapse reopened uncertainty, allowing continued movement. Investigators later questioned whether intermittent monitoring undermined the very certainty they sought to build. How did victim selection challenge assumptions? Investigators observed Theodore Robert Bundy targeted educated women. Profilers debated motive implications. Some officers dismissed the pattern as coincidence. Others saw intentional manipulation of trust. Case notes reveal disagreement. Did stereotypes about offenders delay recognition? Or did investigators avoid assumptions to preserve objectivity? That hesitation complicated interpretation of behavior before disappearances escalated beyond denial thresholds. What did arrest timing change? After Theodore Robert Bundy's Utah conviction, investigators across states reassessed unresolved cases. Links emerged rapidly, files reopened. Patterns once dismissed, now aligned. Was this genuine discovery or confirmation unlocked by legal validation? Detectives questioned whether arrest granted permission to connect dots previously avoided. That psychological shift reshaped investigative narratives retrospectively, altering perceived inevitability of conclusions. Why did defense challenges fail publicly? Attorneys for Theodore Robert Bundy highlighted procedural errors. Judges acknowledged concerns but upheld verdicts. Investigators noted jurors favored narrative cohesion. Was complexity sacrificed for decisiveness? Court transcripts show legal sufficiency outweighed investigative nuance. That divergence between courtroom proof and investigative doubt widened silently, leaving unresolved questions buried beneath affirmed judgments and reinforced public confidence. How did confessions complicate truth? Theodore Robert Bundy offered selective admissions late. Investigators recorded inconsistencies. Some details matched evidence, others conflicted. Detectives debated motive, control, delay, notoriety. Were statements clarifying or contaminating unresolved cases? Confessions shifted public belief toward finality, yet internally expanded doubt over which facts were independently verified versus supplied by the suspect himself strategically. Why were some disappearances never charged? Investigators linked multiple cases circumstantially to Theodore Robert Bundy, without prosecutable evidence. Families sought answers. Detectives documented suspicions privately. Courts required proof beyond inference. Does investigative certainty differ from legal certainty? That divide left unresolved victims outside official counts, sustaining debate over the true scope and limits of evidentiary attribution. How did hindsight reshape narrative? Posthumous analyses portray inevitability. Investigators reviewing timelines note decision points once uncertain. Did later outcomes retroactively simplify complexity? Case reviews show branching paths, not straight lines. Certainty appears cleaner backward. But investigators question whether inevitability is narrative comfort, masking moments where different choices might have altered trajectories significantly. What lesson resists closure? Reviewing the Theodore Robert Bundy investigation exposes tension between evidence accumulation and decisive action. Investigators acted, hesitated, adjusted. The official story holds. Yet doubt persists where caution delayed intervention. If certainty forms gradually, when must action interrupt doubt? That unresolved threshold continues challenging investigators confronting emerging patterns before consequences harden beyond reversal. Why did investigators resist reopening closed assumptions? Detective Robert Keppel later noted internal reluctance to revisit early conclusions involving Theodore Robert Bundy. Files labeled "Resolved" discouraged reassessment. Younger officers hesitated to challenge precedent. Was institutional confidence protecting integrity or preventing correction? Case annotations show unanswered questions left untouched, not disproven, as investigative momentum shifted toward preservation of established certainty over renewed scrutiny. How did training doctrine influence decisions? Police manuals cited during the Theodore Robert Bundy era emphasized corroboration thresholds. Investigators followed protocol strictly. Critics argue rigid adherence delayed action. Supporters argue restraint prevented wrongful arrest. Which doctrine better serves justice when risk accelerates? What warnings were quietly dismissed? Several tipsters named Theodore Robert Bundy directly. Investigators logged calls but rated credibility low. Some callers lacked evidence, others sounded emotional. Detectives prioritized substantiated reports. Did skepticism filter noise or discard signal? Call logs reviewed later show frequency increasing before arrests, raising questions about how credibility judgments shaped investigative blind spots. Why did psychological framing matter? Investigators described Theodore Robert Bundy as articulate, cooperative, and educated. Those traits influenced threat assessment. Some officers underestimated risk. Others warned charm masked danger. Reports showed disagreement. Did demeanor bias interpretation? Behavioral notes suggest expectations shaped questioning tone and urgency, subtly steering investigative posture before forensic or testimonial certainty emerged. How did execution timing affect truth-seeking? As execution dates approached for Theodore Robert Bundy, investigative review halted. Pending questions were shelved. Resources redirected. Officials cited finality. Critics cited abandonment of inquiry. Does punishment end investigation or merely responsibility? Internal correspondence shows unresolved leads left dormant once legal closure became imminent, freezing uncertainty rather than resolving it conclusively. What institutional lessons were documented? Post-case evaluations reference Theodore Robert Bundy when revising serial crime protocols. Investigators acknowledged delays, coordination failures, and confirmation bias risks. Yet recommendations remained broad. Were lessons truly absorbed or ceremonially recorded? Policy changes cite the case, but later incidents suggest similar patterns reoccur, challenging claims of meaningful institutional learning. Why do documentaries still reframe events? Media producers revisit Theodore Robert Bundy with new angles. Investigators note selective emphasis. Some choices amplify certainty, others highlight doubt. Which framing serves truth? Original records contrast with simplified narratives. The gap between archival complexity and storytelling clarity sustains controversy, keeping investigative decisions open to reinterpretation long after participants exited the process. How does evolving science challenge closure? Modern forensic standards question techniques used against Theodore Robert Bundy. Investigators acknowledge methods once accepted, now scrutinized. Courts resist retroactive application. Should certainty expire as knowledge advances? The case illustrates tension between historical context and modern validation, leaving unresolved whether justice depends on contemporary standards or contemporaneous acceptance. What remains unknowable? Investigators concede some victim outcomes linked to Theodore Robert Bundy will never be fully reconstructed. Evidence degraded, witnesses gone, records incomplete. Does uncertainty weaken truth or define its limits? Case summaries include footnotes acknowledging gaps. Those gaps persist, resisting narrative closure, and reminding investigators that certainty often coexists with permanent absence of answers. So what failed first? Evidence, interpretation, or timing? Reviewing the Theodore Robert Bundy investigation reveals moments where facts existed without action. Investigators acted eventually. Certainty arrived late. If investigative truth depends on when doubt is overridden, who decides that moment? That unresolved threshold remains the case's enduring question, challenging every future investigation confronting emerging patterns.